You said we could be a family.
What are you talking about?
You said!
Wait!
I'm tired of waiting.
Evelyn is, at the same time, one of the most vile yet sympathetic characters that Ethan Winters will encounter during the events of the game Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. A bioweapon created by black market powerhouse The Connections, Evelyn was designed with the intention of using her for infiltration and pacification of enemy combatants. A role which she was very suited for, but not a role that she ever really wanted to fill. From as far back as she could remember, Evelyn had yearned for a family. And so, in 2014, when the opportunity would present itself to break away from the experiments and search out that which she longed for, she would take it.
Are you mad at me, Mommy?
No, Evie, I'm not mad. Wait, what did you call me?
I don't want to live at the lab anymore. I want a house. And I want you to be my mommy.
Okay, Evie. I'll be your mommy. Just come back with me. Right now, okay? Where are you, Evie?
The story of Evelyn as we know it begins with the crime syndicate The Connections, and their work towards next-generation experimental battlefield superiority, or NEXPIS. In the year 2000, The Connections, with the technical assistance of the HCF, a highly trained group of soldiers under the direction of Albert Wesker, would begin research into Nexus with the goal of creating a bioweapon that was capable of neutralizing combatants en masse with minimal direct contact. Unfortunately for The Connections, this project would eventually fold. However, the desire for such a powerful weapon that could pacify and even turn enemy allegiances was still very prevalent, but the technology for such a bioweapon just wasn't there. That is, until a vicariant evolution fungus, commonly termed as mutamycete, was discovered, and turned this distant desire into a very real possibility. With the fungus, The Connections researchers began introducing the mutamycete genome into a stage 4 human embryo, creating candidate specimens which they graded with letters ranging from the impractical A series to the perfected E series, with Evelyn being the first and only known member of the E series line. It was believed by the researchers that it would be best to give the bioweapon a common appearance, one that would make it all the easier for them to blend into populated areas and arouse little suspicion. Settling on the image of a roughly 10-year-old girl, Evelyn was created, artificially aged to resemble an unassuming child that could easily blend in with the masses. However, underneath the facade, Evelyn was anything but normal. The E-Series bioweapon was born with the ability to secrete the fungal mutamycete at will, and when the mutamycete was introduced to a host, Evelyn would demonstrate profound control over their actions. From the time that E001 would infect the host, they would go through several stages before complete subservience. Hosts of Evelyn's secreted mold would be subjected to hallucinations, both visual and auditory. They would hear Evelyn's voice in their mind, see her when she wasn't really there. These conversations within the minds of the hosts would start innocent enough, Evelyn asking for assistance or companionship. But as the mutamycete would overtake more and more of the host's body's cells, these innocent remarks would turn much more extreme. Evelyn requesting for them to self-mutilate, or even attack others, as the host's ability to fend off the bioweapon's influence would become harder and harder, and her brainwashing would take effect.
I can hear her. I can feel her clawing her way back inside of me. Get out! Leave me alone!
On top of her ability to control a person's mind, Evelyn also sported the ability to create superorganisms formed of countless fungal filaments, all coming together to create one cohesive being. Researchers dubbed these creatures as the Molded, seeing as they were created from mold and were also shaped or molded by Evelyn. Needless to say, Evelyn was a very impressive bioweapon, and other interests within the black market world soon began to take notice of just how exceptional she truly was. However, there was one issue that the researchers made note of with their perfected E-Series bioweapon. Evelyn had a dangerous obsession with the concept of family. When she would infect subjects within the testings, she would always force the hosts into familial roles to act as her mother or father. Researchers surmised that this was perhaps a subconscious instinct, that Evelyn knew that surrounding herself with family would arouse less suspicion in social situations than just a lone girl. But they also knew that it was possible that she was attempting to fill her life with what it lacked most: love. Specifically, the love of a devoted parent. Evelyn would continue to be extensively tested for the bulk of her time with the Connections, with researchers learning quite a bit about the young bioweapon, but barely scratching the surface of what she was truly capable of. However, unfortunately for the Connections, their time with E001 would come to a halt in 2014. With word getting out about the incredible abilities that Evelyn possessed, the Connections feared that she was a high risk of being stolen from their base of operations, and wished to transfer her to a more secure location in Central America by way of ship. This transfer was to be handled by two Connections operatives that would take on the role of Evelyn's mother and father to avoid suspicion amongst the crew, likely paying off the captain of the ship and claiming to be distant relatives of his. Agents Mia Winters and Alan Droney escorted Evelyn onto the ship for safekeeping. But on the way, things would go very, very wrong.
How's it going?
She's vomiting. Far more in excess of her body mass.
Oh, great. We're gonna be seeing a lot more of her ugly friends if this keeps up. All right, we need to find her, and fast. This is getting out of hand.
Agreed.
On October 5th of 2014, a massive hurricane would throw Evelyn's transfer into chaos. The hurricane caused the E-Series bioweapon to become unstable, vomiting excess amounts of mold onto the ship, which infected the crew. The storm battering the tanker as Evelyn began to let her powers loose on the inhabitants of the ship, killing Alan Droney and infecting Mia Winters, attempting to force her into the role of mother that Evelyn had picked out for her. This conflict between the bioweapon and her handler would reach its climax as the storm would rip the tanker to pieces. Mia would be thrown from the ship, and along with the tanker would eventually wash up in the bayous of Louisiana Parish named Dulvey. In these swamps, the debris of the tanker would stay, until a few days after the storm, when it would be discovered by a young man named Lucas Baker, who would tell his father of the wreckage and implore him to investigate. And when he did, Lucas's father, Jack, would find both Mia and Evelyn amongst the debris of the destroyed tanker. Bringing these survivors back to his home, he placed Mia and his daughter Zoe's trailer to rest, and placed Evelyn in his son Lucas's old room to do the same. In this new room, Evelyn would awaken, and instantly make the Baker family regret the kindness that they'd showed these strangers. One by one, Evelyn would infect the members of the Baker family, Jack, Marguerite, and Lucas falling to her will almost immediately, with Zoe showing resistance, but Evelyn knew that it was only a matter of time. With the Bakers fully under her influence, Evelyn finally had the loving family that she'd always wanted. But even still, she wasn't satisfied. As time went on, Evelyn desired a bigger family, and to that end would begin instructing the Bakers to abduct people from around the area, tourists and vagrants being the easiest to take without arousing suspicion. Over the course of the next 3 years, Evelyn would instruct the Bakers to abduct dozens of people, turning the majority of them into biofuel for her molded creations. However, in 2016, Evelyn would undergo a rapid change, seemingly one that would be brought on by her high mutamycete secretion and high stress levels of maintaining this new family. In August of 2016, Evelyn would begin to rapidly age, transforming from this young girl into a weak elderly woman who required a wheelchair just to have mobility. Evelyn's condition eventually stabilized, and despite her new frailty, her control over the Baker family was as strong as ever. But, unfortunately for her, with the arrival of a new family member, a wrench would be thrown into her plans.
You're gonna be one of us. And then maybe you'll play nicely.
I'm not playing.
No! Get that away from me!
A man named Ethan Winters had come to the Baker family estate in search of his estranged wife Mia. And shortly after he'd arrived, Evelyn had decided that he would make the perfect father. She instructed Jack to capture the intruder, and with the help of the others, turn him into a member of the family. But the task would prove more difficult than Evelyn had thought. Ethan would defeat the members of the family at every turn, finding out more and more about what was happening in these Dulvey swamplands, and eventually finding a way to put a stop to it. With the help of Zoe Baker, he managed to create a serum to cure his wife Mia. Then, with Mia's help, he was able to create a necrotoxin that would put a stop to the E-Series bioweapon once and for all. In a game of unfortunate people, Evelyn's tale is one of the saddest. She was born to be studied, the connections showing her no affection and twisting her mind to reflect the evil entity that they desired for her to be. She had no one to care for her, no one to love her unless she forced them to do so. And so she did, creating a perverse but loving family that she'd always wanted. She was never taught how to be a real person, and as the atrocities that she'd committed in attempting to create that which she longed for caught up to her, she still didn't understand why the love that she wanted the most in this world was always out of reach.
You.
Why does everyone hate me?